Hello and welcome to Power Culture Coco, home of the Coco. I have ideas, and most of those ideas are about dismantling patriarchal myths to heal our wounds of dehumanization and obedience to irrational authority. Today, let's talk about dehumanization, specifically why patriarchy is the institutionalization of male narcissism, which is why women experience relationships with patriarchal men as narcissistic abuse. This is the intentional outcome of patriarchal belief systems, narcissistically abusing women to generate the fantasy of innate male superiority as men's lived experience. And that's kind of dense, right? But don't worry, we're going to unpack it all together. Stick with me. This pattern of narcissistic abuse is most obvious in traditional romantic relationships, but not exclusive by any means. Patriarchal men feel entitled to narcissistically abuse all girls and women in their orbit because it is intrinsic to the belief that men are innately superior to women and thus entitled to make profitable use and meaning of women and girls. And meaning making is really important here. Patriarchal men genuinely believe that women have no right to exist outside of how men want to use us for profit, pleasure, and status seeking. And that is why they hate single and child-free women, because it's like seeing an empty factory with no owner to make profitable use of those production capacities. Right? And this is related to the concept of like female submission, right? That is about men making use and meaning of women. That concept is about conditioning women to fulfill the role of subsidizing resource and to view upholding boundaries or standards of reciprocation with men as a personal failure or violation of our supposedly docile and subservient nature. They want to discourage women from seeing boundary setting and upholding standards as a necessary part of being an adult. And that's critical. Patriarchal narcissism actively seeks to keep women emotionally immature and psychically dependent on men, so men can more easily access the labor and pleasure they seek to take from women. Which is why so many patriarchal men claim that, oh, women are like children, women aren't rational, women are so emotional, bah, 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 bah. All of that is a projection because they want women to have a childlike emotional dependence on men so men can control and exploit women easily, less barriers to taking. They don't want women to mature into sovereign adults with identities that are independent of our relationship to men, because that creates barriers to exploitation. They want women to believe that the meaning and purpose of our existence is to center and serve men by doing the essential work of life for them without compensation or reciprocity. For men to experience their fantasy of innate superiority, women need to believe that we are innately inferior. That is why controlling the narrative is so important. That's how we learn to assign meaning to our own experiences. For example, if a man intentionally harms a woman, like stealing her car keys so she is unable to leave the location, there are two main ways to make meaning of that situation. One, this man is trying to trap me to abuse me and I need to get the heck out of here. Or two, this man loves me and needs me so much he's illegally imprisoning me. So really, I should probably stay and make this work because this poor man can't survive without me. I didn't realize he loved me so much. So the first perspective is a mature recognition of the situation that centers the woman's safety and sovereignty first. The second is an immature codependent perspective that abandons self to center and rationalize the man's narcissistic abuse. Do you see what I mean? All right, so let's break down patterns of narcissism and then get into the patriarchy of it all. So narcissism is always based in a fantasy of innate superiority, which is an attachment to a false sense of self, the grandiose self. So the narcissist feels entitled to receive special privileges, entitlements, and excessive adulation from this attachment to their fantasy self. And they feel entitled to manipulate, exploit, and harm others to experience those entitlements because they lack empathy. They either cannot or refuse to recognize and value the needs and feelings of others. A part of this lack of empathy is because their true self is deeply insecure and wounded, right? They attach to the fantasy self to escape their true feelings of inadequacy and inferiority. And that's why they seek out constant adulation and superficial admiration to paper over that real sense of inferiority. They also lack empathy because narcissistic people do not have the capacity to perceive others objectively as independent human beings with their own internal worlds and separate realities that are just as complex and legitimate as the narcissist's own. They only view people as objects that are either acting beneficially or harmfully towards the narcissist's goals of experiencing superiority and unearned privilege. Narcissists also have a strong belief that their needs should automatically be considered and met, and that others are required to do so for them. Ringing any bells, ladies? So this is a state of arrested development. This type of narcissistic entitlement where there's no boundaries between self, others, and the world is a normal aspect of childhood development, but narcissists don't emotionally mature out of it, so they never develop the adult capacity to decenter self in perception of others or the world around them. In this way, they are absolutely boundaryless, and it renders them incapable of taking accountability for their own choices and the consequences engendered. They feel that they're always merely reacting to circumstances and what life and others do to them, so they reject personal responsibility for their choices. So if you've heard other feminists or creators say that men expect women to mother them, this is the pattern they're often referring to. Childlike narcissism, where men expect women to automatically meet their needs for them and never hold them accountable no matter how poorly or cruelly they behave. There's a poem, The Narcissist's Prayer by Dania Craig, that really encapsulates it very well. The poet does not like their work cited without permission, so Google it if you'd like to see it, but the gist is, I didn't do it, and if I did, it wasn't that bad, and if it was, you deserved it. But she says it poetic-like, you know. So this boundarylessness and attachment to the false fantasy self occurs because narcissists do not have a stable internal sense of self. They rely on the outside world to mirror back their fantasy self and affirm it. This is why narcissistic people feed on the attention and energy of others. It is their fuel. While they prefer to receive excessive adulation and admiration, a narcissist would much rather know they have the power to make you hate them than to ever feel ignored. Since they cannot regulate their internal experiences, narcissists seek to control others instead, coercively controlling others in situations and narratives through deceit, manipulation, and manufacturing fake crises is how the narcissist will self-soothe and maintain access to harvesting their fuel by forcibly centering themselves in others' lives. Indifference is genuinely the worst thing a narcissistic person can experience because it means that they cannot unilaterally affect your mental, emotional, and material state. Because narcissistic people require others' participation to feel real in their fantasy self. When cut off from feeding on the attention and emotional reactions from others, the narcissist cannot experience their fantasy self and is left with their empty, wounded, real sense of self. This is why narcissistic people become despondent, rageful, or wrathful when cut off from their supply. Generally, they'll either emotionally collapse or viciously lash out. A part of lashing out often involves launching a smear campaign to destroy the reputation of those who challenge their sense of superiority or denied them entitlements. Which goes back to meaning making, right? I, as the innately superior one, get to use and make meaning of you. And if you deny me, well then you're worthless, you're cruel, you're vindictive, you're spiteful, you're crazy, I'm the sane one. So this process is full of gaslighting, scapegoating, and causing as much harm as possible, materially, socially, and psychologically, and beyond, right? It's about punishing the other for refusing to participate and create the fantasy as lived reality. So Coco, are you saying that every man walking this earth has narcissistic personality disorder? Absolutely freaking not. So that's a clinical diagnosis. People with NPD do embody these traits and patterns, but they cannot turn it on and off in different situations. Their fantasy of superiority is rooted in their individual personality, so it affects all aspects of their life. Personality disorders are pervasive and enduring. Patriarchal narcissism, thank God, does not meet that clinical threshold because it is a result of socialized entitlements and beliefs which a person is absolutely capable of releasing and maturing beyond if they so choose. The same way kids are socialized to believe in Santa Claus and spoilers, as they mature, they evolve beyond that belief and realize it's not real. Oh, sorry if you were still a Santa believer. So patriarchy socializes boys and men to believe that they are innately superior by virtue of being biologically male. The entitlement to superiority is rooted in collective identity, not individual personality. By being taught that men are superior to women, they develop a narcissistic orientation, right? Which is contextual on gender lines. Meaning a patriarchal man will feel entitled to abuse and exploit women, but may very well treat other men respectfully and as fundamentally equal human beings. Their dysfunction isn't rooted in their own personality, but within gendered entitlements, their beliefs of how women and men should behave and be treated. And it's much easier to change a belief system than an entire personality structure, just straight up. So all supremacy orientations are narcissistic orientations, right? Patriarchy is the original blueprint of assigning social supremacy by an intrinsic trait, right? Being born biologically male. An intrinsic trait is a feature of the vessel that you were born into, not a reflection of who you choose to be and what you choose to create. So all other supremacy orientations are built on this image, right? White supremacy is a narcissistic orientation based on skin color. So white supremacists feel entitled to narcissistically abuse people of color, but may very well treat other white people with respect and dignity, right? Same way as patriarchy. So how does patriarchal narcissism manifest in traditional gender relations? I mean, like all the ways. Like I'm sure like it's all ringing bells for you already, but let's flesh out a couple of points, right? All of the double standards, right? That's all narcissism. The idea that men are designed to F anything that walks, but women are degraded by body counts, like narcissism. Men who claim it's a deal breaker if a woman steps out in the marriage, but, he'll also claim that it's natural for men to cheat. Narcissism. Like, the idea that men should be the indisputable authority over his household without actually participating in the daily responsibilities of it because his needs should automatically be met by women and he has no responsibility to learn about hers, let alone actively contribute to the household. But also, he needs full control, right? The idea that men should only have to perform paid and respected work outside of the home and that a woman is solely responsible for all unpaid domestic labor and care work for the family, even if she works too, right? And I've said it before and I will say it a million times. UN analysis found that despite making up 50% of the full-time workforce, American women still perform over 80% of unpaid domestic labor and care work, which contributes over $3.6 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars of value to the economy every single year. That's narcissistic abuse, right? And that value, by the way, not reflected in GDP or Social Security benefits. It's just consumed as an entitlement that men and society writ large is entitled to demand and take from women. And structurally, it goes on and on and on, right? But interpersonally, it's even worse. The compulsion to feel superior to your partner guarantees an abusive dynamic. It motivates men to feel that they need to outcompete their partner or sabotage their partner to protect and maintain feelings of superiority. And that's the real crux here. Relying on fantasies of innate superiority prevent people from developing real self-esteem. So they feel that they have to punch down to preserve their superior status at all costs. So at the macro societal level, we are currently experiencing narcissistic backlash to women individuating from patriarchal narcissism. Women making meaning of our own lives and centering our own selves, developing our own inner authority instead of centering a man's approval or proximity to feel valuable or worthwhile. And that's a big problem because that also removes men's supply of feeling superior. When women do not center men by default, they lose access to that narcissistic supply of, I feel superior by consuming from you. Do you know what I mean? Without structures of male welfare that artificially and violently centered men and women's lives, men are not adapting well, right? Marriage used to be mandatory for women's economic survival, but thanks to feminist advocacy, American women can now be socially and economically independent and thus uphold standards for men and make meaning of our own lives that doesn't involve men, that does not center them. And men feel that loss of privilege of being default centered by women as a narcissistic injury, and they're lashing out or falling apart in response. Not all men, but too many. And so Scott Galloway talks a lot about how men are most vulnerable to unaliving themselves after experiencing divorce. And that's an example of narcissistic despondency that we talked about earlier. How narcissists either viciously lash out or emotionally collapse when cut off from harvesting energy and attention from others. And that's a pattern built into the structure of patriarchal narcissism because men don't really realize how much of their lives, the infrastructure of it, is facilitated by women, right? Their wives, their sisters, their mothers, whatever. And so when they don't have women facilitating the infrastructure of their lives, they don't know what to do. And it's really frustrating for women. It's we can talk till we're blue in the mouth, help me with this, I'm trying to show you. But this kind of institutional narcissism, in a lot of cases, can only be broken through our absence, through withdrawing from that dynamic. Because, if you're in a position where you don't have empathy for women, you're not going to listen. When a woman is telling you, this hurts me and I need to leave if it doesn't stop, you don't take it seriously. Rescinding Roe v. Wade is narcissistic backlash, right? Oh, you women think you're more than a baby incubator and a bang maid for men? Let's make abortion healthcare illegal. Let's start to limit access to birth control, and let's take away no-fault divorce laws, all of which are Project 2025 agenda goals, right? Let's get rid of all of that so that we trap women with abusive men and we force women to have to center men so that by subsidizing men, they can experience their fantasy of innate superiority. So the backlash happens on many, many levels, right? But really, women will not go backwards. Their efforts to abuse us back into the past will not work out. Long term, they're only going to further isolate patriarchal men and further depress birth rates. For real. Because women are waking up en masse to realize that patriarchy holds no mature vision for human life, and that to participate in patriarchal narcissism is a slow and painful death for women. Exposure to chronic narcissistic abuse is the cause of so many health problems for so many women. The human body is well equipped to manage situational stress, right? There's a tiger, I gotta fight or flight or whatever, right? Our body's really good at processing that. But the human body is not designed to process long-term enduring stress that cannot be resolved. And cohabitating with patriarchal men is chronic enduring stress that cannot be resolved. A man who constantly seeks to dominate and consume unreciprocated energy and attention and labor from women, who seeks to sabotage anything that she has for herself that isn't centering him, a man who will manufacture crisis to forcibly center himself in her life, a man who seeks to control every aspect of her life instead of just learning how to regulate his own emotions and insecurities. That is constant, unresolvable stress for women, and that literally causes diseases and illness. Long-term exposure to male narcissism will trigger pre-existing vulnerabilities a woman genetically carries, right? So our genes, our DNA, are activated or remain dormant based on environmental experiences. So a woman who is genetically predisposed for autoimmune disorders will have that manifest in the face of chronic male narcissism. And this is why women make up over 80% of people with autoimmune disorders. And it's why women are disproportionately represented in chronic fatigue issues like fibromyalgia, right? Chronic exposure to male narcissism literally triggers disease, so women's bodies end up attacking our own selves. So it's no joke. This isn't just like a preference thing. This is like patriarchal narcissism will ruin your nervous system and break your body down as a woman. And so I really do believe that we are in fourth wave feminism, a new wave of feminism that is all about womanhood's individuation from patriarchal narcissism, forging our own path forward, making meaning out of womanhood that has nothing to do with masculinity. It is about us individually and collectively. And so as we continue down this path, patriarchal men are going to keep freaking out. Like, they really will. Some, it'll be enough to like trigger them to do the work, to dismantle those belief systems and join us. And some will just keep freaking out, right? So the short term ahead is a lot of chaos and backlash, but the long term is the death of patriarchal narcissism as the default settings of society. And it is a long con battle, don't get me wrong, but is absolutely worth holding the line and fighting for. So, all right, I'm going to wrap it here. Drop a line in the comments. I always love to hear your thoughts and reactions. Like and subscribe for weekly videos and follow me on TikTok at Coco Has Ideas. And I will see you next time, my friends.